Well, thank you very much, Ben. Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good.
Can I hear that again?
Good.
Yeah, I don't really believe you. I was quite hot and my bum was going to sleep on the seat. Okay, so what I'd like to do is I'd like to give you all a mini break because we're going to have a bit more chat and stuff. But so what I'd like you to do, can I just see, is anyone in here thirsty? Because I was quite hot. Is anyone thirsty? Have you all got water? You're all well equipped? Okay, we don't need to do an emergency water break. What I would like you to do is I'd like you to all to stand up, please. Just like you to stand up. Okay, I just want you to just like wiggle your legs around. Move your shoulders, give us a bit of shoulder action. If you're on the screen at home, you can have another sip of tea or coffee. Just stretch, give yourself a bit of a twist, and breathe a little bit. You're here, you're alive, you're in the room. Good morning, right, okay, thank you. Have a seat when you're ready. I just wanted to do that because I knew that how good it felt when I stood up. So, thank you. And you hear you can hear all the energy coming back into the room. Your human body has come back to life, and that was unprepared, but I just felt you deserved it. Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm going to take a little while just to talk about a few things about how to change your rules in unthinkable times. My name's Andrew Collinson. I'll introduce myself a little bit. But before I do, and in case you get bored, walk out of the room, or I collapse or something in the heat up here, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to say that we clearly face important challenges. We must build what I'm thinking of as collaborative intelligence. Vim says I was going to tell you about how to work with AI. I'm not going to tell you anything about AI. I will do another time in the conference, but today I'm talking about people. And I'm talking about the HI bit, the HI fit, the human intelligence part, and about how we are and how we operate in this. Because, you know, the old maxim, rubbish in, rubbish out, you know, whatever you're going to do is only as good as you and the way you use it and the way you think about it. And I think it's something that we underinvest in. And I can say this very comfortably as a research analyst because I've read this all my life and I've worked in the industry a long time, and I'll explain this. And I would also like to encourage you, not to tell you to do it, but to invest in training your own human intelligence. And I'll give you some suggestions of how and where to look for that. And by the way, thank you. Do take pictures. You will get the slides, and I've got loads of references at the end of them as well. So I put some resources that you can get to. By the way, I was just looking around at the speakers, and I wanted to say congratulations on the previous speakers. I wanted to say congratulations on our security guys for being a Swedish guy and a German guy, German or Austrian, I'm not sure, I apologise if I got it wrong, doing the most rock and roll security presentation I've ever seen. So congratulations for that. We had the most finished presentation I have ever seen in my life. And I love Elisa, and I've worked with them a lot, and I love that. Thank you, that was a real joy to me. Thomas, it's great to see you again, and I loved all the stuff. 15 years. I'll refer to some of the stuff you talked about. Vim, lovely to see you, and thank you so much for becoming a new chairman. Welcome. Anyway, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone while we're here. Right. Where's the money in telecoms? That's actually my job. I thought this was a really good slide, but probably not now. This is actually what I do, Connective Insight. I do research stuff. But I also partner with a lot of people because I'm a very curious and entrepreneurial person. I do a thing called Unthinkable with a guy called Dean Bubley. Some of you might know Dean, Disruptive Dean. And we've started a thing where we're helping people explore different things, unthinkable things, because I think we live in unthinkable times. We feel unthinkable is a great word. It summarizes the zeitgeist. You know, so much stuff is happening. I also do some work in AI stuff in two different areas with other partners. One about the business case for it and the money in it, and the other about some really, really new stuff, which is either scary or amazing, depending on how you look at it. And I also work for the CPaaS Acceleration Alliance, which is also a bit engaged in AI, actually, funnily enough, but it's all about how you make enterprises work. So I do a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm doing some stuff in the AI sessions later, so this is the commercial break. And most of the stuff I'm talking about here is in this bit, the human and money bit. So what does all this really mean? Well, It means the question is, where's the money? And what do I mean by where the money? I always think, well, where's the energy? Where's the momentum? Where is the interest? Where are decisions are going to be made? What are the most important things that are going to happen? What needs to change? And then very often, what keeps stopping us? Because what you see time and time again is you see the right ideas not working and things coming to a halt and all that kind of stuff. And I find that absolutely fascinating. And I'm going to talk more about this bit on the right hand here than I am the left. And what have I learned in 40 years? So I was 20 years myself in a telecoms company, in one of the UK telcos. I worked in mobile and fixed and all that stuff, in marketing and in strategy and in engineering and new ventures. And since then I call myself an entrepreneurial analyst, as you can see. I have a load of things going on. What have I learned? And a bit of a spoiler alert, it's all about the people. I was the research director for SDL for 15 years, and when I first joined it, they had this amazing thing called Telco 2, and it was all about technology. And after about 3 weeks, I realised it wasn't about technology at all, it was about people. It was always about people. And I loved what you said about psychological security, by the way. I think it's so important. But it goes beyond security. I think it's the most important thing you can establish in a workplace and in any environment, home, anywhere. Anyway, I'm diverged. Big picture. So what I'm now going to try and do is take you out from a global picture that we started off with through our companies and into what we are doing here today as people, and some ideas about what we might want to do differently. Here's the world, beautiful, absolutely lovely picture. Actually, I don't know if it's a picture, but it's still beautiful. There's going to be 10 billion people on it. 10 billion people on it by 2050, I think, something like that. Doesn't really matter, it's 9 billion now. I mean, it's a lot of people, right? And I don't really want to talk about this when we're in Athens in a hot room, but we know this is true. And the combination of these two fundamental facts means that we are facing increased competition for resources. That's just, it's such an obvious thing when you see it written down simply, but this is what we face. And what does that lead to? It leads to, I stole these pictures from Vim's presentation, which he was silly enough to give to me first. And, I'm afraid these are sources of stress on the right-hand side for most of us. So that's what's going on. That's the big picture. And it is also leading to competition between ideologies within that, tribes. So we've got the kind of Chinese version of events, state party control. I don't really know how to describe the US state of control at the moment. I'll put some words there and I'll let you use your imagination. There are a number of autocratic regimes which are highly controlling, and there are also theocratic regimes out there which are also quite controlling in their different ways. And these are these things are actually competing against each other. I mean, there's no point in pretending anything different. This is what is happening in our world. And I apologise to everyone in Europe, but the best symbol I could think of for Europe was a croissant. Because when I was a child, and indeed still in Britain, the sort of height of sophistication is a continental breakfast which has a croissant in it. So I apologise if it hasn't got sauerkraut or Polish dumplings or Finnish vodka or whatever is your food of choice. I picked a croissant. I apologise. But what's the beauty of Europe? It's democratic, maybe a little too bureaucratic. It's diverse. We've got some tech. I think it's quite interesting. I like that thing about the big companies, but is big companies all that matters? I'm not sure that is quite the way we should be thinking about things. But I'm not going to talk about that here because we've got too much to cover. I'm going to be talking about us. But what I'm saying is, think for yourselves is a really important part of this. Set your own targets, set your own drives. I think is really important for Europe. And we did a bunch of work in an Unthinkable workshop, Dean and myself, and we were talking about European competition and regulation. And I've just got a very few sort of points. This has just come out of the US separation, and obviously it was a shock. It still is the way the US is behaving, I think, to many people. But it's probably not going to go back. And it's quite clear that European regulation is too cautious and complex. But also, European telcos seem to me, and I don't mean this about the people in this room, I apologise, but more systematically to be scared to make decisions. I think we make a lot of excuses. We say, oh, the regulation's really difficult. How many times have you heard that? I've been in meetings where people say, we can't talk about that, it's antitrust. And I said, no, it isn't. And I explained to them why. People are fearful. We are too fearful in this industry in ways. Lots of other stuff. I don't really want to talk about this because we're not talking about this here, but the basic thing is we have to change. Europe has to change. That there are things that we have to change, that we like, that we want. If we want to stay Europe, if we want to stay diverse, multicultural, interesting, different, free, we have to change some stuff that we may not have otherwise wanted to. But the price, that is the cost of surviving in the world that we live in a real way. And I think the answer to this is that diversity is our strength. And we must recognize those strengths, the independence, the liberty, democracy and culture. But we must change our rules. I'm going to be talking about our rules. I'm not going to be talking about regulation. You'll be pleased to hear, I hope. I'm going to talk about how we think, how people think. And interestingly, when you look at the subjects of resilience and innovation, they both require the same things. They require flexibility. They require the ability to adapt, to change, to move quickly. And I think that's an understood thing in the world. And I think what I'm going to be talking about a lot is how do we as people get better at that? And I think there's a new advantage that we can develop, which is collaborative intelligence. And I'll try and explain what I mean by that too. So, big picture, what is collaborative intelligence? Winning by working together and in partnership with AI and other industries. Sound familiar? Sounds like kind of what you're doing, frankly. So this is all good. And I think the point of this is that, the objective is to prove, in a way, that the freedoms and relationships that we have are at least as good as the control of the others. So when you think of Europe as a whole, and I'm English, so okay, we did some funny things a couple of years ago, which you might be aware of. We're still part of Europe. We may not be part of the EU. We think the same way. It's not the same part of the same cultural phenomenon, in a way, as Europe. And it's so important for us to understand this because we are now at war. Or we should think of ourselves as at war. We're not firing bullets. We're not shooting missiles. But you heard the TNO presentation about what's going on in the world. Best way to prevent war is to prepare for it. This is how we should think. I'm sorry, I don't like saying that. I don't like saying that to myself. I don't like saying that to my children. And Vim told me to cheer everybody up. But there's no point in bullshitting you about this or lying about it. This is the place that we're in. But if we do the right things, we can change things for the better. And you are in a fantastic place to do that. So I wanted to say some other things to you about how you might go about thinking about it. Collaborative intelligence. Isn't this a beautiful picture, by the way? I put it in mostly because it's a beautiful picture, but secondly because, a bee is a simple thing, really, but they're incredibly collaborative. They go back to the nest, they dance out the position of where the best honey is. They're able to kill predators by swarming together and overcoming the Asian hornet wasp with their body heat, for example. They have amazing facilities. I can't think of a better analogy. I mean, I don't think it's a great analogy, but it just felt to me like it's to give you an idea of the right direction. It's about us all working together in different ways and sharing ideas. Well, what does this mean? What does it actually mean? Charles Darwin, looking depressingly like I think I'm going to look in a couple of years, but still. Success. I think success is going to come through a combination of human intelligence and artificial intelligence. I see what you're saying about the budgets going down, by the way, in the focus we were talking about. I'm not sure that's true. I've seen that in other places too. I think there's a bit of a dip happening because people have gone through a bit of a spending splurge and not quite got what they want, but it will continue. AI is not going to go away. We have to embrace it. We all know that. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. Most of you are probably way better at it than I am. I've used a bit of it in this, as you can probably tell, but I'm not going to talk about that. There's lots of places you can do that. What I am talking about is about adapting to the unthinkable and what that actually means and how we make our human intelligence fit for purpose. And but let's just go to the company level next, okay? So what's unthinkable for ETIS? I read the rather good NATA survey, and I made a bit of a word cloud from it, and added a couple of words of my own in there, like bigotry, because I think that's quite important. We avoid that. But these are the words that came out in your survey, which are very much reflect the concerns that we talked about before, the drivers of the world. So this is not a surprise to you. You're working on all the right things. A couple of results I pulled out. Now, this one says, how resilient to geopolitics do you believe your company is today? If I am the glass half full person, I would say it's brilliant that more than half of the telcos and the techcos are at least resilient or very resilient, and 10 to 20% of you are very resilient. If I was the glass half empty person, I would say it's absolutely terrifying that we've only got 12 and 21 because of what we face. And so clearly your task is significant in what needs to be done in that particular area. And the same is true about AI. How would you describe your organization's current use of AI? Bit better, 60 to 70% of the people sort of saying, yes, we're doing something about it, but still relatively low general use of it. By the way, and I'm not saying AI is brilliant for all of us. I'm not saying it isn't going to take some of our jobs. It is. We have to coexist with it. We have to learn how to use it. We have to be in charge of it, is the fundamental answer here. And to be really brilliant, we need more. We need to be stronger in this. So I very much support what you were saying about the investment in this. So what does this mean? It means you have important jobs, which really matter. So I don't know if you care about someone else saying it, but I'm saying it to you now. I really appreciate what you're doing. It's great you're doing it. I hope you have a brilliant 2 days and give it everything. And I really value what ETIS does. And I always say to people, I love coming to us because they do real things. So good on you. But change is not going to stop. And it's not going to slow down. So how can you thrive? What do you do? What does, every person in this room, how do you adapt to this circumstances? What can you do differently? I think you need to invest in training your HI. So a question for you. If the telecoms industry invests, let's say 1% of its revenues, it invests about $20 billion a year in research and development. It's just, as the kind of sharpening the saw for telcos. How much do you think it invests in training and personal development for people? Do you think it's 20 billion? How much do you invest as a percentage of your income or your time in developing you? I'm not doing a survey, you'll be pleased to hear. But I think, what was your? Well, that's really good, right? 1 or 2%, so that's 1 or 2 days a year. Yeah, right. Okay, you're in a senior position, right? I doubt it's that much for everybody in this room. That's really good. Do you do it? Yeah, you blinked. Yeah, well done. Sorry, I'm not calling you a liar. I'm glad you're doing it, but are you doing enough? Could you be doing more? And I'm going to talk about some of the areas that you could be doing. So I'm not talking about training in terms of like technical training. I'm talking about how you develop your own skills and abilities. So I'm just going to talk about me because I don't really know you personally, obviously. The way the world works with me is if the world is working with me, or the world is happening to me, it makes me unhappy. That's how I generally perceive the world. When the world happens to me, this is a bad thing. However, when I am happening to the world, like now, because I'm talking to you, and I'm sorry if you're in this camp, by the way, I feel happy because I feel that I've got agency and I'm working in the world. I know that's how I work, right? You will have your own version of this. And what happens is that however your balance is determined, unthinkable things disrupt us. So, and I saw this, someone drew this for me a long time ago, and I think it's really good. It's like your effectiveness versus the stimulus that you face. And there's a sort of relationship between how much interesting stuff is happening, interesting stroke difficult is happening, and how well you're doing. And there's a bit where you're really happy and good. Happy is perhaps the wrong word, but you might be called as in flow or in a good state, enjoying your work. However, too little, bored. Too much, stressed. And this is what happens when the world happens to us, when unthinkable things happen, when Donald Trump announces new tariffs, when Russia invades Ukraine, and when you see the other terrible things that you see on the news, this is what happens. When things change at work, this is what happens. And when that happens, we have to change, we have to maneuver. There's a great thing, the OODA loop. I'm not going to explain it, you'll understand this, right? And you can look it up if you want to, it's quite an interesting thing. It's the fundamental basis of all intelligence actions, all the programs that we do is the OODA loop. We look at stuff, we change that, we decide what to do, and then we see if it's worked. But we often get stuck in that process. Things go wrong for us quite a lot. Why? Because we get confused, distracted, alarmed. We can't decide, or we avoid the priorities, and we fail to plan or act. I speak for myself, not for you, but these things have all happened in my life, and I expect they have for you. And I hope they haven't, but perhaps they have. Why, and what can we do? Well, my answer to the question of why is because we're still running on Human 1 software. We are still running on the software that the Greeks had when they first built the Parthenon, when Shakespeare wrote the sonnets, when Einstein came up with the theory of relativity. Beautiful, brilliant things, but we're now in 2025 and we're still running the same software. The good news is change is possible and you can improve it. And the way I'm going to outline to you is to invest in your HI fitness, as I see it. And the sort of areas, I'm just going to cover all of these 4 areas. Understand how you're wired, think about your emotions, sharpen your thinking, and identity. And identity is really complex, difficult, and important, and we'll come to that last. So let me start with your hardwiring. And I apologize if anyone's squeamish, but this is a sort of very rough picture of the brain. But don't worry about all the words and all the squishy bits. I want to just explain something really simple about our brains, as I understand it. This bit in the middle is your sort of basic animal brain. I think people call it the limbic system and things like that. Every animal has it. It's instinctive, it's responsive, it's powerful. It's where you think about cake, sex, death, power. Getting that immediately, our primal responses, that happens in here. And all this pink bit around the outside is the stuff that's writing poems and making plans and thinking about important things to do. And there's always a conflict between those 2 parts of the brain. And, let me give you an example. One example. There are many, but let me give you an example that, because I'm talking here about some of the bugs in the system, if you like, which is we are auto-programmed to take the path of least energy. So we've evolved as creatures to do not necessarily the minimum effort, but actually the minimum mental effort to solve a situation. And this can result in very difficult things. For example, you feel a bit down. Do you go for the chocolate or the gym? I'm making no judgments. We all like a bit of chocolate. But let's face it, one's a lot easier than the other, and they both work. And this is just one example of the ways that our core neural psychological makeup drives us to do things that may not be in our best interest or make the best decision. And that's a very simple example of many others. And there are a couple of very good books. These resources are all written down at the end. There's a great book about the chimp paradox, which talks about your mind as being a chimp versus a human and a computer. And if you ever suffer from anxiety, I recognise the book about rewiring your anxious brain, because I had some anxiety and that really helped me. Harness your emotions, the second thing. I think I may have shown some of you this before, but there's this brilliant piece of neuroscience which shows that this is social pain. This is something upsetting you, and this is physical pain. Trigger very, very similar areas in the brain and a very similar level of response. And I thought that was a profound insight. Social pain actually has physiological symptoms similar to physical pain. We always think, oh, well, it's crazy, it's not crazy to put a plaster on your knee, but you're bad if you feel bad about something. You're not. It's a fact. It's a real thing. It's not an imaginary thing. And emotions are socially triggered very often and create neural responses. And there's a very good framework, which I don't have time to talk about, called the SCAR framework, which we can talk about later if you want to, which helps explain that and how to think about it. Well, in fact, maybe I'll do it very quickly now. There's a big change. An example is there's a big change, but a team doesn't want to change how it works. So, this is the kind of thing we see often. You've got something you want to get done differently in the organisation. It might be your team or another team. Why? Probably because it affects somebody's status. They're uncertain about what the outcomes are going to be for them. It changes their autonomy. It changes who they work with, the relatedness, and it feels unfair. If you deal with those factors, you're much more likely to make the change that you want work. That's a very simple example. And the books that are very good for this, I particularly recommend this one, Your Brain at Work. It's very, very helpful in that. And two others there for different sort of circumstances. And sharpen your thinking. You've probably seen quite a lot of stuff about this, but I put a picture of my favourite saw from the garden because of the old sharpen the saw analogy. But we sometimes like to confirm our own views more than we want to know a different reality. This is a very common bias called a confirmation bias when you talk about it in posh terms. And an example I see of this quite often is people commissioning research to prove they're right rather than finding the holes in their plan. It's a very common thing. You'll see it. And you see lots of biases emerge in work. And really what I'm trying to say is try and work so that your brain understands its biases. And there are ways of doing it. And these are kind of very good books for doing that. And last but not least is about reviewing your habits and identity. And this is really complex, but also really important. So what does identity mean? Identity means, where do you come from? I'm Swiss, I'm British, I'm Russian, how do I feel? It changes the way you act. Identity means your role. You act sometimes in the role that you have. I know that sometimes I go home as an analyst and my wife says, what's that plant? And I think I need a spreadsheet. And she just wants me to agree with her. But what's happening is that I am going into the role of analyst when I'm at home. I haven't really taken off my hat. And understanding how your identity changes your behaviour is a really important thing. And it's a very layered and holistic construction, but you can change it. And some good resources for that are these ones. You've probably seen the 7 Habits book. There's another question which is very powerful, which is about 6 questions that can change your life, which is about identity. And if you want to dig into that, I recommend it, but only if you really want to do it. So basically what I'm saying is, am I really aware of what's controlling my actions? Go back to the big picture question. What I'm trying to say is, if you're not making the best use of your own resources, if you're not controlling your emotions, understanding how your wiring works and using the best thinking that you can, and understanding how your identity is influencing your decisions, am I really aware of what's controlling the output of my AI or what I'm putting into the board or why I'm recommending these things? Does this still work? Am I still doing it right? Am I responding quickly enough? Can I flex it? What do I need to change in my thinking to change it fastest and with least pain? Now, none of this is easy, but this is what will make you more successful. All the rest of it, you probably got on, but I just wanted to share this with you because I think it's so important. So in summary, we face a lot of stuff. We've got to build together. And we need to invest in ourselves. And I think beyond the very credible 1 hour a week and 1 or 2%, thinking about how your core self works is really important in this. If we want to make our place better, and you are in the perfect place to do this, you're at ETIS, in Athens, in the working groups, fantastic. These are the references, these will be in the slides. And thank you, that's all I wanted to say. And if you want to connect, it's my